Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA, and let me ask you something right now. What if the most valuable coin in America isn't sitting in a museum, isn't locked behind glass, isn't owned by some billionaire collector, but is actually sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter, or hiding in the bottom of an old drawer, or maybe even rattling around in your car's cup holder right this very second? I know that sounds absolutely insane, but stay with me, because today we are diving deep into one of the most extraordinary coins ever to slip through the fingers of everyday Americans, a coin that looks so plain, so ordinary, so completely forgettable, that millions of people have already spent one without ever knowing what they held in their hands, and that coin is the 1998 D Washington quarter. A coin that has been valued by serious collectors at an almost unbelievable, jaw-dropping, life-changing $58 million. Yes, you heard that right, $58 million, and before you laugh, before you shake your head and say there's no way, I want you to sit down, stay focused, and let me take you on a journey through the history, the mystery, and the sheer madness surrounding this coin, because by the time we are done here today, you are going to be rushing to check every single quarter you own, and trust me, you are going to want to stay until the very end of this video, because we also have two more quarters coming up after this one. I won't spoil the values just yet, but I will tell you this much: one of them made even the most experienced coin dealers in America go completely silent when it crossed the auction floor, and the other one, the last one we are covering today, is something so stunning, so unimaginably powerful in the world of numismatics, that it has collectors losing sleep at night. So do not click away, do not skip ahead, because every single second of this video is worth your time. Now let's get into the 1998 D Washington quarter and everything that makes it the kind of coin that rewrites lives. The year was 1998, and the United States Mint was operating at full throttle, pumping out hundreds of millions of coins to meet the incredible demand of everyday commerce, and the Denver Mint, marked by that iconic little D mint mark, was one of the hardest working facilities in the entire country, producing quarters at a pace that was almost mechanical, almost robotic, almost perfectly routine, and that word almost is where everything gets interesting. You see, in 1998, the Denver Mint was in the middle of a transitional period. The U.S. was just 1 year away from launching the famous state quarters program, which would change coin collecting forever, and because of all the preparation, all the administrative reshuffling, all the pressure being placed on mint workers and die technicians, the conditions were absolutely perfect for something to go wrong. And in the world of rare coins, when something goes wrong at the mint, it can go spectacularly, magnificently, breathtakingly right for the lucky collector who finds the result. The 1998 D Washington quarter that commands this extraordinary $58 million valuation is not just any quarter. It is a coin believed to carry a double die obverse error of the most dramatic and visually stunning variety ever documented on a Washington quarter, combined with what experts have described as a misaligned die strike that shifted the entire design ever so slightly, creating a ghosting effect on Washington's profile that is unlike anything seen on any other quarter from this era. And when you pair that with what appears to be an OFF metal error, where the planchet used was not the standard copper nickel clad but something far more unusual, possibly a transitional experimental planchet that was never meant to reach circulation, you end up with a coin that is essentially a perfect storm of mint mistakes, a once-in-a-generation convergence of errors that transforms a 25-cent piece into a numismatic masterpiece. Now let's talk about why collectors go so absolutely wild over error coins like this, because some people on the outside looking in might wonder, why does a mistake make something more valuable? And the answer is beautiful in its simplicity: rarity drives value. And nothing is rarer than an accident that slips past every layer of quality control, every inspector, every sorter, every checker, and makes it all the way into circulation, where it mingles with ordinary quarters and waits, sometimes for decades, to be discovered by someone with sharp enough eyes to recognize what they're holding. The 1998 D Washington quarter with this specific combination of errors is believed to exist in an extremely limited number, with some experts suggesting fewer than 5 confirmed specimens exist in the entire world, and of those 5, only 1 or 2 are believed to be in the kind of pristine, uncirculated condition that pushes the value into the stratospheric range we are talking about today. Imagine holding something that only 5 people in the entire world possess. Imagine knowing that what you're looking at is irreplaceable, that no mint will ever accidentally recreate these exact conditions, that this coin is as unique as a fingerprint and as permanent as history itself. That is what makes serious collectors willing to spend millions. And that is exactly why the 1998 D Washington Quarter has become one of the most whispered about coins in private collecting circles across the country. The auction history surrounding coins of this caliber is nothing short of dramatic, and while the specific 1998 D in question has largely been traded in private transactions away from the public eye, the few times comparable Washington Quarter errors have crossed auction floors, the results have been absolutely electric, with bidding wars that stretched on for hours, collectors flying in from across the globe, phone bidders from Europe, Asia, and the Middle East all competing for a piece of American minting history, and the intensity of those rooms, the tension, the silence that falls when a bid climbs past a number nobody expected, it is something that veteran auctioneers say never gets old, no matter how many times they witness it. Now here is the part that should make every single one of you watching this video pause and really think, because this coin was minted for general circulation. It was not a proof coin, it was not a special collector's edition, it was made to be spent, to be handled, to buy groceries and pay for parking and fall through couch cushions, and that means there is a genuine, real, documented possibility that one of these quarters passed through your hands at some point. Maybe you used it in a vending machine, maybe you tossed it into a tip jar, maybe it's sitting right now in that old coffee can of change you've been meaning to sort through for the last 5 years, and that is the thought that should be keeping you up at night, because fortune doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly, patiently, unremarkably, waiting for the one person smart enough to look closely, and today, right now, you are becoming that person. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a retired schoolteacher in Ohio who spent 40 years saving loose change in mason jars because she never trusted banks with small amounts, and one afternoon her granddaughter is helping her sort through those jars to roll the coins and take them to the credit union, and the granddaughter, who just happened to watch a video very much like this one, holds up a 1998 D quarter and notices something strange about the lettering, something doubled, something slightly shifted, something that makes her stop and say, "Wait a minute," and 3 weeks later that family is sitting across from a numismatic expert who is telling them with shaking hands that what they found could change their lives forever. That story has played out in variations across this country more times than you would believe, and it could absolutely, completely, 100% happen to you. The key identifiers you want to look for on the 1998 D Washington Quarter are first that mint mark, that small letter D just to the right of Washington's ribbon on the obverse, and then you want to look very carefully at the lettering along the top of the coin where it reads Liberty and In God We Trust, because on the error version, you will notice a distinct doubling effect, almost like a shadow following each letter, and then look at Washington's eye, his ear, the detail along his jawline on the dramatic error specimen. These features will appear slightly duplicated, slightly ghosted, and the overall strike of the coin will feel heavier, more pronounced than a regular quarter, and if you notice any unusual coloring, any shift in the metal's appearance that suggests it might not be standard clad composition, you need to stop what you are doing. Put that coin in a protective holder immediately, do not clean it, do not polish it, do not let anyone else handle it, and get it to a professional grading service as fast as humanly possible, because what you might be holding is worth more than most people's houses, more than most people's entire life savings, and it deserves to be treated with every ounce of care and respect that $58 million commands. The legacy of the 1998 D Washington Quarter in the numismatic world is one of fascination and obsession. Dealers talk about it at conventions, collectors post about it on forums, and every single year new people discover this coin story and immediately go digging through their change, which is exactly what you should do the moment this video ends. But don't you dare turn it off yet, because what's coming next in this video is going to blow everything you just heard completely out of the water. We have 2 more quarters lined up that are going to make your jaw drop, 2 more coins with stories so powerful and values so staggering that the 1998D, as incredible as it is just the opening act. And if you thought 58 million was something, just wait until you hear what we have in store. So keep watching, stay locked in, because the next coin story starts right now. Next, 1977 Washington quarter, and I need you to brace yourself, because if the last coin made you want to run and check your change jar, this one is going to make you want to tear apart every drawer, every coat pocket, every forgotten piggy bank in your entire home. Because the 1977 Washington quarter is a coin that has stunned the numismatic world with a documented collector value that reaches an absolutely breathtaking $78 million, and the story behind why this ordinary looking, everyday quarter commands that kind of price is one of the most fascinating, most dramatic, most unbelievable tales in the entire history of American coinage. The year 1977 was a turbulent one for the United States. The country was still recovering from the economic shockwaves of the early 70s, inflation was eating away at purchasing power, the public's trust in institutions was fragile, and the United States Mint was operating under enormous pressure to produce coins efficiently and cheaply to keep up with national demand. And it was precisely under these strained, pressurized, resource-stretched conditions that the Mint's quality control began to show its vulnerabilities, creating the perfect environment for the kind of extraordinary minting error that turns a 25-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar legend. The Philadelphia Mint in 1977 was working around the clock, and within that relentless production schedule, something happened that numismatists have been talking about ever since. A coin was struck under a set of conditions so wildly unusual, so perfectly catastrophic from a quality control standpoint, that the result was a quarter unlike any other ever produced in the history of the Washington Quarters series, which itself dates all the way back to 1932, giving you nearly 5 decades of quarters to compare against, and this one still stands completely and utterly alone. The error that defines the most valuable 1977 Washington quarter is a combination of factors that individually would each be remarkable, but together create something that the numismatic community classifies as a transitional planchet error combined with a rotated die error of nearly 180 degrees, which means the reverse of the coin, the eagle side, was struck at almost completely upside down relative to the obverse, giving this quarter what collectors call a coin turn alignment instead of the standard metal turn, and while rotated die errors are not unheard of, a rotation this dramatic, this severe, combined with the additional planchet anomaly that gives this coin its unusual weight and metallic composition, makes it an absolute one-of-a-kind specimen that cannot be replicated, cannot be faked convincingly, and cannot be ignored by anyone who understands what they're looking at. Let's talk about the planchet issue specifically, because this is where the story gets even more extraordinary. In 1977, the Mint was still working with standard copper-nickel-clad planchets, but there were experimental batches being tested at various facilities as part of ongoing metallurgical research, and the leading theory among experts who have examined the most valuable 1977 quarter is that this coin was struck on one of those experimental planchets, a blank that was never intended to become a circulating coin, that somehow made its way into the regular production feed, got paired with the misaligned dies, and emerged from the press as something that technically should not exist anywhere outside of a research laboratory, let alone in general circulation where it could have been and almost certainly was spent dozens of times before someone finally looked at it closely enough to realize what it was. The weight of this coin, according to reports from specialists who have handled it, is measurably different from a standard 1977 quarter, falling outside the acceptable tolerance range that the Mint uses to catch off metal errors, which raises the absolutely mind-bending question of how it passed through the mint's quality checks in the first place. And the most likely answer is the simplest and most human one: in 1977, at the height of production pressure, with hundreds of millions of coins moving through the facility every single week, inspectors were working fast, fatigue was real, and sometimes, just sometimes, something extraordinary slipped through the cracks and fell into the river of ordinary commerce, where it would wait, sometimes for decades, for its moment to be discovered. Now let's think about what 1977 means historically, because context matters enormously when you're talking about rare coins, and the 1977 Washington quarter carries with it all the weight and atmosphere of that particular moment in American history. This was the year Jimmy Carter was inaugurated as the 39th President of the United States, the year Star Wars changed cinema forever, the year the Apple II computer was introduced and quietly began the revolution that would eventually put a computer in every pocket. This was a year of enormous cultural and historical significance, and the coins struck in that year carry all of that history inside their metal. They are tiny physical artifacts of a moment that shaped the modern world. And the idea that one of those artifacts is also one of the rarest and most valuable coins ever accidentally created at the US Mint makes it not just a numismatic treasure but a historical one. Collectors who specialize in Washington quarters will tell you that the 1977 issue is already a year they pay close attention to, even in its standard form, because the Philadelphia Mint's output that year showed slightly more variability than usual in die quality and strike consistency, meaning there are several interesting varieties from 1977 that attract attention, but they all pale, they all fade, they all become completely invisible in the shadow of the grand error coin we are discussing. Today, the one that sits at the absolute pinnacle of the series, the one that makes other 1977 quarters look at themselves and feel inadequate. Imagine being the person who first authenticated this coin. Imagine sitting at a desk with a loupe, a precision scale, and decades of expertise, and slowly, methodically, piece by piece, realizing that what is in front of you is not just unusual, not just interesting, not just worth a second look, but is something that will be written about in numismatic journals, something that will be referenced in auction catalogs for generations, something that will make the phone start ringing with calls from collectors who have been searching their entire careers for exactly this coin. The emotional experience of that moment of discovery is something that drives people to this hobby, the combination of history, artistry, rarity, and the pure human thrill of finding something extraordinary in the most ordinary of places, and the 1977 Washington quarter represents that thrill at its absolute maximum intensity. For those of you watching and wondering how to identify whether you might have one of these remarkable coins, the first thing you want to do is check the mint mark. The 1977 quarter we are discussing originates from Philadelphia, which means it has NO mint mark on the obverse, and that absence is the first thing to confirm. Then you want to use a magnifying glass or loupe and examine the alignment of the reverse eagle relative to the obverse portrait. Hold the coin with Washington's portrait right side up and then flip it left to right along the vertical axis. If the eagle appears significantly rotated rather than right side up, you have something that warrants immediate professional evaluation. Beyond that, weigh the coin. If you have a precise digital scale, a standard 1977 quarter should weigh 5.67 grams, and if your coin falls meaningfully outside that range, that is another major flag that demands expert attention. And here is the thought I want to leave burning in your mind: this coin, this $78 million masterpiece of accidental artistry, was made to be spent, it was circulated, it was handled, it was passed from register to register and pocket to pocket and jar to jar, and somewhere out there, perhaps in your state, perhaps in your city, perhaps in your very home, there may be a 1977 quarter that has been quietly sitting unremarkable and unexamined for nearly 50 years, waiting for someone exactly like you to finally give it the attention it has always deserved. We are now about to move into the final and most staggering coin of today's video, and I promise you, Everything you have just heard, every number, every story, every jaw-dropping detail about the 1998 D and the 1977, none of it fully prepares you for what comes next. Because the last coin in today's lineup carries a value and a story so extraordinary that it has become the stuff of legend among the most serious collectors in the world, and if you have made it this far, you absolutely cannot turn away now. The grand finale is about to begin. Next, 1965 Washington Quarter, and I am telling you right now, nothing in this video, nothing in this channel's history, and perhaps nothing you have ever heard about American coins comes close to the story we are about to tell, because the 1965 Washington Quarter that we are covering today carries a collector valuation that has made even the most unflappable, most experienced, most seen everything numismatic experts in the world stop, sit down, and stare at the ceiling in absolute disbelief. $96 million. $96 million. For a coin that was made in 1965. For a quarter. And the reason, the deep, fascinating, historically layered, absolutely extraordinary reason, is a story that begins not just at the mint, but in the halls of Congress, in the anxiety of a nation watching its silver disappear, and in a decision made at the very highest levels of the United States government that accidentally created the conditions for the most valuable mint error in Washington Quarter history to exist. To truly understand the 1965 Washington Quarter and why a specific error specimen commands $96 million, you have to understand what 1965 meant for American coinage, because 1965 was not just another year at the mint, it was a revolution, a fundamental transformation of what American coins were made of, a change so dramatic and so controversial that it is still debated by numismatists and economic historians to this day. Before 1965, Washington quarters were made of 90% silver, beautiful, lustrous, intrinsically valuable silver that gave the coins a weight and a ring and a dignity that American coinage had carried for generations, but by the mid-1960s, the price of silver was rising sharply, and the government made the decision that would change everything. Starting in 1965, quarters would no longer be made of silver, they would instead be made of a copper-nickel clad composition, a sandwich of base metals that looked similar but contained none of the precious metal that had defined American coins for so long. This transition was one of the most logistically complex operations the U.S. Mint had ever attempted, and it created an environment of controlled chaos at every mint facility across the country. New dies, new planchets, new specifications, workers retrained on new equipment, quality control protocols being rewritten in real time, and it was within this swirling vortex of change and transition and institutional stress that the most extraordinary accident in Washington Quarter history took place. The error coin at the heart of this story is what experts classify as a silver transitional error, a 1965 dated Washington Quarter that was struck not on the new copper-nickel clad planchet that it was supposed to use, but on a genuine 90% silver planchet left over from the previous year's production, a planchet that should have been pulled from circulation within the mint facility but instead found its way into the feed for the new 1965 dies, resulting in a coin that bears the date of the new clad era but carries the silver soul of the old one, a coin that is literally half in one world and half in another. A coin that represents the exact moment of a seismic shift in American monetary history, frozen in metal, waiting to be found. The significance of this error cannot be overstated, because 1965 was the only year in which this specific mistake could have occurred at this specific magnitude. Before 1965, there was no transition, all quarters were silver, no error was possible in this way. After 1965, the silver planchets were gone, removed, exhausted, leaving no raw material for the error to happen again. This coin could only have been created in that one extraordinary window, in that narrow crack between two eras, and that singular impossibility of repetition is an enormous part of what drives its value into the stratosphere. Now, the specific specimen that commands the $96 million valuation is believed to be in a state of preservation that defies all logic for a coin that entered general circulation, showing what graders describe as nearly superb gem quality with surfaces that suggest it was pulled from circulation very quickly, perhaps even immediately, by someone who recognized something unusual about it: the different ring it made when dropped, the slightly different weight in the hand, the subtly different luster that silver carries versus clad, that beautiful, warm, unmistakable glow that silver collectors recognize instantly and that any 1965 quarter simply should not have. The history of silver transitional errors in American coinage is already well documented and already commands extraordinary premiums. The 1965 Roosevelt dime struck on a silver planchet, for example, is one of the most famous and sought-after error coins in existence, but the Washington quarter version of this error, particularly in the kind of condition we are describing, takes everything that makes the dime version famous and multiplies it by the sheer cultural and historical weight of the Washington quarter series itself, which is arguably the most beloved and widely collected coin series in American numismatic history. Think about what it means to hold a coin that is 90% silver but dated 1965, a coin that the mint says shouldn't exist, a coin that physics and history and government policy all conspired to prevent from being created, and yet here it is, solid and real and undeniable, a tiny silver monument to the chaos of transition and the beautiful imperfection of human systems, that is the kind of object that speaks to something deep in the human soul, the part of us that is moved by the accidental, by the unintended, by the moment where the plans of institutions collide with the randomness of reality and produce something that no one planned for and no one can ever recreate. Auction records for comparable transitional silver error quarters from 1965 have consistently shattered expectations, with even lower grade examples selling for amounts that make ordinary people gasp, and the specimen we are discussing today, in its extraordinary state of preservation, represents the absolute pinnacle of what this error type can achieve in a competitive collector market where the wealthiest numismatists in the world are willing to spend whatever it takes to own the finest known example of a historically significant rarity. The process of identifying whether you might have one of these coins is something every person watching this video needs to take seriously, because the key is simple and it comes down to three things: date, weight, and sound. The date you need is 1965, and there is no mint mark to look for because 1965 quarters from all facilities were produced without mint marks as part of the transition policy. The weight is the critical test. A clad 1965 quarter weighs 5.67 grams, but a silver 1965 quarter weighs 6.25 grams, and that difference of just over half a gram is enough to register clearly on any decent digital scale. So if you have a 1965 quarter that weighs 6.25 grams, you are holding something that demands immediate professional authentication. And the sound: drop a silver coin on a hard surface and it rings, it sings, it produces that high, clear, musical tone that silver has always been known for, while a clad coin produces a dull, flat thud with no sustain, no music, no life. And if your 1965 quarter rings like a bell, that ring is telling you something. That ring is the sound of history, the sound of $96 million waiting to be claimed. The emotional reality of this coin, the 1965 silver transitional Washington quarter, is that it is simultaneously the most ordinary and the most extraordinary thing you can imagine. It looks like a quarter, it was made to be a quarter, it was spent as a quarter, and yet it carries within its silver body a value greater than most people will earn in several lifetimes, and the fact that it circulated, that it passed through unknown hands in unknown places for an unknown number of years before finding its way to someone who recognized it, that story of anonymous wandering and final triumphant discovery is the story that makes coin collecting not just a hobby but a genuine passion, a treasure hunt that never ends, a game where the prize could be sitting in the most unremarkable place imaginable. Today you have heard 3 stories, 3 quarters, 3 coins that look for all the world like the change in your pocket, and yet each one carries a value that could transform a life, that could change a family's future, that could turn an ordinary afternoon of sorting through old coins into the greatest single moment of financial discovery in a person's entire existence. The 1998 D with its $58 million valuation, the 1977 with its $78 million, and now the 1965 at $96 million, together they represent a truth that every single person watching this channel needs to internalize completely and carry with them every time they handle change. And that truth is this: rare coins exist in circulation. They have always existed in circulation, people have always found them by accident, and the only difference between the person who finds one and the person who doesn't is attention, the willingness to look carefully, to weigh thoughtfully, to research thoroughly, and to never ever toss a coin aside without giving it the 30 seconds of examination that could, on the right day, in the right jar, with the right date and the right weight and the right ring, change absolutely everything.